Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be, whenever you happen to be watching it, live, recorded later. Welcome back to another Ask an Expert session here at the IKEA Foundation. My name is Ryan, I'm part of the communications team, and we're thrilled to have you. As a reminder, please say hey and tell us where you're from in the comments. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. Today we have a really special session, and for that I'm very happy to welcome Jolanda van Ginkel, Program Manager for Renewable Energy. And just a reminder, you can also ask questions of us in the comments during the session. So Jolanda, over to you.
Great. Hey, Ryan, thanks. And thanks to everyone joining us. And know that we do have indeed many people from many different places in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you. So at IKEA Foundation, we aim to create a better everyday life for the many people. And we believe that we can actually do that by creating sustainable livelihoods while protecting the planet. We enable that by our grant making, in which we work closely together with our partners, the experts. So I'm part of the renewable energy team at IKEA Foundation, and we believe that having access to renewable energy is actually a key enabler for many other developments. So making access to energy easier, more affordable, and inclusive is actually critical to enable people really in poverty to develop an income and assets in a sustainable way. So one of the fun things of my job is actually that I'm privileged to work with inspiring partners who are just like us, committed to powering communities with renewable energy by 2030. And today we're in conversation with one of them, Sustainable Energy for All, SEforALL in short. So SEforALL supports progress on the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which is all about ensuring access to modern energy for people worldwide without leaving anyone behind. So I'm super excited to welcome our guest, Damilola Ogunbiyi, CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN Energy. Hi, Damilola, welcome.
Hi, Jolanda. Thank you for having me today.
Great. So, Damilola, I mean, you've been active actually in the energy access sector for quite a long time, starting as a young leader in Nigeria, where you were the first woman to be appointed actually as Managing Director of the Nigerian Rural Electrification Agency, and now leading to your role in SEforALL. So what drew you to this role of energy access?
I mean, one of the key things, especially being an African, is seeing, when you actually see other people who are less fortunate, in poverty, and you think, what are the key ways of achieving those barriers, and understanding that energy is key to that. Sustainable energy, sustainable cooling, really trying to get people out of poverty. And I am still a strong believer that energy and energy infrastructure is one of those key ways. So from a very young age, I wanted to devote my life and my career to sustainable energy for the less privileged, and like you said, really truly leave no one behind.
Great, and actually in leaving no one behind, it's essential, right, that we all collaborate in achieving this universal access to energy. And the work of SEforALL actually is directing at getting all the stakeholders, so whether it's governments, if it's NGOs, if it's financial institutions, businesses, around the table, and empower them with data, evidence, and partnerships they actually need in order to act. So looking back, what are some of your key experiences from your professional journey so far that you take along with you in your current role of interacting with all these stakeholders?
I mean, one of the key experiences is just understanding impact on ground. There's a lot of things we say on this level, and there's a fantastic opportunity I have now as being the CEO of Sustainable Energy for All to be able to speak to so many stakeholders and hold people accountable in terms of you cannot achieve universal access by 2030. Sorry, you cannot achieve net zero by 2030 if you don't achieve universal access. So what takes me along is, when I see like women being able to work in communities and in villages as SMEs because they have electrification, because they are earning 2 times as much as they used to earn when they didn't have electricity. When I see, the infant mortality rates, dropping because you provided sustainable energy for primary healthcare centers, those things take me along. But one of the key things and the beauty about my role now is that there's such a large spectrum of people you have to talk to. And a lot of people want to do the right things, but they needed to be guided on exactly what to do. So SEforALL is critical now in, like you said, providing data, integrated energy planning, powering healthcare planning to really help governments and the private sector to really tool up to make sure we achieve this common goal. And I think that's what really drives me, that we're falling behind, and that people are behind all of this. And as we think, we have to think of for people and for planet in everything we do.
Yeah, great. And there's actually so much sitting into your answer already. We will actually tap into some of those things like data and the tools that you use later on in our conversation. But I was wondering, what's your most memorable experience in your journey in doing this so far?
I mean, my most memorable experience must be when I was much younger, I think about 28, working in Lagos state government, and then working on primary healthcare centers. And I was really ignorant at that age on the power of energy as it relates to the entire health system, especially in an African country or a large megacity like Lagos. And the nurse told me one day, and she said, "Do you know that it only takes 7 seconds for a baby or mother to basically die during a major operation, and there's no generating set you can turn up in 7 seconds." And that has always struck to me, and it has also always brought the urgency to me as well. So when we're coming up with these plans or coming up with these advocacy, for me, and you get that from my team, Jolanda, I'm sure you see, we've got to do it now, because I don't think there's any greater job anybody can have than literally working on a space that saves people's lives, but more importantly saves babies as well. So that for me is the personal story that I always take along, and it really keeps me going on some very, very hard times during these roles.
Yeah, very inspiring. And I think indeed all of us working in energy access have a story related to that. I mean, that's why we do it for, right? For really the people actually lacking energy access at this moment. So the theme of our conversation today is actually how SEforALL makes a business case for governments. But I was wondering, knowing, actually you do it for people on the ground, but how would you then define a business case for a government in this context?
I think it's important to understand that you have to, what SEforALL does really well is when we're talking to governments, we tailor make the argument to government. So I tend to not come in with climate at all. I tend to come in with, higher GDP. We know the data shows for every $1 we invest in sustainable energy, there's a GDP growth of 35 cents. I come with energy efficiency creating more jobs, renewable energy creating 3.5 more jobs than the typical fossil fuel equivalent. I talk about 59% more additional wages to a woman given sustainable energy. And that changes the conversation, right? And then you also look at the localization angle and how they can really create momentum while having healthier people and a healthier community, right? That for us is very, very critical, showing countries that in this crisis we are all interconnected, and we have to work together to basically build back better and build back greener. So you would find in a lot of the documentations that we do, we tie it into economic growth, because you can't really expect governments to do things without the economic growth story linked to that. So that is how we tailor depending on which audiences that we're speaking to.
Yeah, great. So actually what you're saying is that renewable energy really needs to be at the heart of this recovery of the pandemic in order to get come out of this. I hear a lot of also economic advantages, and I heard in an earlier actually interview with you that you usually talk about breaking it down for governments really into a language that they can understand. Is it a certain wording that you would use as well, or a certain approach, or is it a different way of speaking to a business versus a government, for example?
Definitely, and depending on which governments as well, you have to do your homework. You have to do your research. You have to know what governments are interested in. If I'm talking to the Ethiopian government, I'll probably be talking about the agricultural revolution they want there. If I'm talking to Nigerian government, I'll be talking about connecting people with digital revolution, or what is the energy required for that. So you really need to, and I think that's the beauty about our organization, because we're so nimble, we really understand what needs. It's the same thing as talking to a business actually, or talking to another sovereign that you want to fund, a smaller sovereign. You need to understand what is their sweet spot. give them that and show them all the advantages of how they can still achieve what they want to, but also achieve the goals we have for climate and energy at the same time.
Yes, crystal clear. Thanks. I do want to remind the audience as well that you can send in questions for Damilola. I'm happily continuing for the rest of the day with launching my own questions, but we're of course very curious to hear what keeps you busy as well. So storytelling, it's actually at the heart of everything we do today, right? It's kind of an integral part of human nature. So how do you tell this essential story of energy by, for example, putting children or families, or the example that you gave, right, with the Children's Hospital, and the communities at the heart of storytelling?
I also, and we also at SEforALL also want to hear other people's stories as well. But we know that what we're doing cannot be incremental, has to be scalable. And that's why it's been great working with institutions like yourself, that understand that, this is a long-term journey, right? We're still in a position where we have 789 million people that don't have access to electricity and 2.8 billion people that have access to clean cooking. It's important to put those things in context and show people that if all those people were electrified in a clean, sustainable way, what that would actually do to the planet, right? And what that would do to the economic growth of those particular countries or the regions. And there are quicker ways, instead of financing other things, that energy is still the heart of, There's so many things that people put money into. And then I had to say, well, where's the energy plan in that? Everyone's like, oh, that comes after. It's like, no, that's the starting point. And if we can resolve energy, we can resolve so many different things. And I think that's the story I want to tell now, and to show that energy access is fundamental for the energy transition story. And there's no transition without access, and that's why I want to, get to everybody that, you can't really you tell countries to transition out of something that they don't even believe they have. You have to focus on making sure everybody's left behind, but doing it in a clean, sustainable way. So you don't even have to come back and transition again. That's very key.
Thanks. And I know that you're a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion in this, and not only when it comes to race or gender, but also acknowledge the importance of including youth in the discussion and action as well. And I think last week, or perhaps the week before, you organized the first SEforALL Youth Summit, where youth leaders from around the world actually demanded bolder action for clean energy and climate progress. So can you please say a few words about that?
Yeah, that was actually fantastic. I wanted to do that because I feel that young people are not giving enough platforms to really express how amazing they really are and the innovation they bring into the conversation. I was very, very fortunate that, I headed basically one of the largest agencies in West Africa at the age of about 27, but a lot of people are not giving opportunities to younger people. So and the conditions of being part of the Youth Summit or developing the Youth Summit in SEforALL is that you had to be under 30. So the whole team under 30, including my special advisor, came up with this amazing event. One, to also educate the youth on what they can do, we didn't feel that the youth had a good understanding of how much energy they consume, and how much, energy efficient they could do, by using less video games and things like that. But then on the flip side, also introduce them to the vast amount of opportunities, either for academic opportunities in the energy space, but also job opportunities that I believe that need to be made available. We need to have, a quota of how many young people that we're introducing in our organizations. And they can't just be the one person in the forum, like we have, and we pick the youth box. They are really, really critical. I don't believe all the innovation and ideas have come out with how we're going to resolve the SDG 7 issue. And I believe that they hold that key. And that was the most important thing for the, Youth Summit. And, please log on to SEforALL to find out some information, just to see some really, really inspiring young people as well. And just the things that they're not, that when they're not, unfortunately, like me, and webinar after webinar, they're just literally on the road, just doing these things. And it's very, very inspiring. And then it shows a lot of us adults that, we really need to push the envelope and explain the urgency of getting this SDG 7 done by 2030.
Exactly, in 2030, I mean, it might sound far away. At the same time, it's around the corner. We actually received 2 questions from the audience tying into this a bit. So a question from Asioma on LinkedIn. What are the essential partnerships required to scale at a pace which is needed to go achieve at 2030? And at the same time, Abimbola from Nigeria on LinkedIn is asking, so what are the requirements for these partnerships?
I don't think there are any requirements to partner to do SDG 7. I think at a global scale, you also want to have the government buy-in. This year is particularly exciting because we have 2 key events. We have what we call a high-level dialogue at the General Assembly of the UN, of which I'm dialogue champion. And what it is that it's an event where it's the first time in 40 years, even the UN is having a conversation about how do we push the boundaries on energy? How do we achieve 2030 targets? So we have, we're going to talk about energy access, energy transition, technology, finance, and look for new innovative ways to do that. For that type of discussion, you need everyone on the table. You need the global communities in terms of the countries. You need stakeholders in terms of the financial institutions, especially the large ones. You need civil society, you need youth, and you need experts like Jolanda on the call today. And IKEA is also part of the theme looking at energy access in that forum. But it's everybody. It's not an issue for 1 or 2 people. It needs to be a global issue, just like how we have climate as an issue. Energy has to be seen as that issue, and energy has to be seen as paramount for us to achieve climate. So we really want everyone in the conversation. Apart from that, we as SEforALL are also going to kick off what we call a Be Bold campaign. That's starting on March 16th. And again, it breaks down in very simple language what we actually have to do and everybody's responsibility to scale. So really excited about all those different events. And then finally, we have COP26. And really, really happy that the UK this year decided to make sure they integrated energy access into the energy transition campaign, of which I'm working with them on that. So there are a lot of very big moments for energy now. We just want, maximum participation from everyone to channel and propel the discussion.
Great. So actually, we can all take part in a partnership, summarizing what you just mentioned. And as you say, there's many high-level events this year happening. So it's really a critical year, actually, in the energy transition, right? So I was wondering, you talk about partnerships, but for example, what other tools do you have, and what other tools do you and your team use as an organization when you do make this business case? In this case, for example, to governments globally.
I mean, when we talk about partnerships, and if you permit me, Jolanda, it's really important for us to also explain the partnership that we have with you guys at the IKEA Foundation and how your funding being unrestricted has allowed us to respond quicker to governments. Because it's one thing about responding, the time and the urgency you respond is really important to see if all these plans are integrated in the first place. So we've responded on plans like proper integrated energy planning. And if I break it down, it's basically showing the country what they need to do and where the people are that they need to power, and what is the best way of providing power to these people. Is it mini grids? Is it solar home systems? Because the energy demand is there. Where are the people who need clean cooking? Where are the people or the institutions that could do better, energy efficiency? In a time of COVID, where should be the cooling solutions, where the cold chain should be. It's extremely powerful information, and it also gives a price tag and breaks things up into manageable projects. So the countries can now take it to institutions like the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, different institutions, and say, look, we have a plan in place. It was, and this fund offered, even when I worked in Nigeria, we didn't get major funding until we had a plan in place. And we were able to raise about $500 million, on the back of that for energy access, which is being implemented now through a subsidy program. But it's very, very important to explain and showcase the power of data. Data is everything. And in the energy access conversation and the climate conversation, data is what is going to drive progress.
And what role do you see for data, for example, if you look at identifying the different types of energy needs? As you mentioned, there's cooling, there's cooking, there's electrification. I mean, usually we talk about energy like it's kind of an overlapping thing, right? But I think some of these things might be progressing a little bit faster than others. How do you see that?
Yes, I mean, unfortunately, what we have is, we have a lot of information now on electrification, and the clean cooking is lagging behind. But clean cooking is one of the most harmful things to the planet right now, not to talk about the horrendous figures that we see in terms of gender-based violence. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to be working on all these things in parallel, right? We know the COVID vaccine is unjust in the way it's being circulated, and we know energy, in some of these countries might cause them not to be able to store the vaccines properly. It's important for us to make sure that when they come to the solutions for cooling these vaccines or powering these healthcare centers, it's in a sustainable way. And the countries also prioritize to get finance to do that. So there's one thing telling people that you need to go clean. There's another telling people that you need to go clean. This is a plan on how you can go clean, and this is the funding you can use to do that. It's a different dimension, and it's the latter that we're really trying to work through.
It actually ties into to two questions that we actually get in through our platform. So the first one I would like to pose on you, and you already touched upon it a bit, which is from Roger Christen on LinkedIn. He's asking, the International Energy Agency says that the number of people in Africa having access to electricity will actually deteriorate in the next 10 years because we're not investing enough. So something, as you said, like 50 billion, and he said in this case, it's required every year for the next 30 years. So how are we going to catch up in closing that finance gap?
Okay, so I agree. I don't think the figure is 50 billion. I think the figure that we have in the mind is only slightly smaller. And it's about 40 billion, and it's from now to 2030 if we're going to achieve it. And the only way that we can close this financing gap, of which currently only about 4 billion actually goes into Africa, because we actually track it through our energizing finance report, is we need to hold other countries responsible, and we need to speak to countries and to agencies and again finance institutions. Or how are you going to fund this gap? Because like I said, it's one thing having all the plans and all the data in the world. The other conversation, which is a very frank conversation and we're having all the time, is how does it actually get funded? How do you realize that energy access isn't just, a solar lantern in some community? It's actually a program and a movement, and it's required. And there's 800 million people, and the business opportunity that it could have for the private sector. So that's how we're trying to develop it. And we keep pushing, but there's so much more money that's needed to go directly into the sector.
Yeah, thanks for that. I would like to tie into another question on a slightly different topic, but you touched upon it in your previous answer. So it's Uras Gorkam on LinkedIn. He's asking, what is the role that startups would have in to help energy access and affordability? I heard you speaking about innovations, for example, in cooling solutions now, and the business case. I mean, it actually makes business sense to get involved. So what is the role of startups in this?
I mean, startups always are the organizations that bring the innovation. In my previous life in Nigeria, and some aspects in the life in SEforALL, I mean, I've worked with numerous startups that's become quite successful, especially in the solar mini grid and the solar home system space. We've worked with a lot of tech companies that just had energy as an input to get more customers, so they just provide the energy as a service. So I think there's a vast opportunity for startups and innovation in the financing aspect, in the tech aspect, and in the energy aspect for energy access.
Thank you for that. So at IKEA Foundation, we always like to champion renewable energy heroes in their local communities, really to emphasize the importance of access, right, to sustainable energy. And I was wondering, can you name any of the governments or global organizations that are, in your mind, at the forefront of powering people with renewable energy? And perhaps you can give us a few examples of inspiration of who are your champions.
Well, I'm going to use my own country, Nigeria. And I'm only saying that because Nigeria was the first country, and is the only country that has successfully accessed the energy access facility from the World Bank and the AFDB. So that's a $550 million facility for energy access. And in that team, which I used to head, there are about 20 to 25 amazing young Nigerians who all came back to solve this issue. We all came back from different parts of the world to solve this issue. And they're just doing some really cool things right now with their resource-based financing, which is a way of financing connections to solar, but paying the developer post-connection. I'm also really proud of Nigeria because in their post-COVID sustainability plan, they put in there not about fossil fuel connections, even though it's a large oil and gas country, but about connecting 5 million households to solar, or 5 million businesses as well to solar. That's 25 million people, which will probably be the largest amount of people once it's committed in at least the West African space. And it's important when governments make these big statements that it's followed through. And obviously we're helping them, and a lot of international organizations, including the World Bank, are helping them. But we want more than a Nigeria. We want most countries, especially with an access problem, to commit to a certain amount that they are going to do, and they are going to push to connect their households using renewable sources. That is our goal. And we feel like Nigeria, as a big oil and gas nation, is good to start off that goal. The other thing that I'm quite proud of them on is the removal of fossil fuel subsidies as well, which is it's a very, very big issue when you're driving clean energy.
Great, and I think it's partly already answering a question that Liz McKeon on LinkedIn actually was asking. So energy innovations are happening all over Africa, led by Africans. So she was wondering if you can tell us a bit about, some that inspired you. So perhaps you can give one of the examples of, well, you gave some from Nigeria, but from other countries that you've seen across Africa as well.
I mean, I worked with this company called Solad when I was in Nigeria. And their basic model was to provide power to SMEs. And what was unique about the model and how they provided the power is that it's almost like a very large solar home system, but instead of connecting one customer, connects 4 or 5 customers. So it's not just it's not a mini grid, and it's not a standalone system, but that innovation used to connect some very difficult and complex kind of market areas in Nigeria focused on SMEs. I thought that was truly innovative. And, the company has done many more markets, in the West African region since then. And they continue to go and thrive with looking at a space and saying, what is the best technology to suit that space, instead of what typically happens is that I have this technology, where can I deploy it? And I think that if we keep thinking like that, like, I don't make presumptions of the best way any country can be electrified or any country should reach universal access. I wait to see what the data says first. And if we work on kind of data-driven decision making, I think we'll work a lot faster, and it will be a lot more effective.
Exactly. Tying into this, one of our previous guests on our Ask an Expert sessions was Harry Hande from Selco Foundation. And one of the striking kind of statements that he made was like, for people living in poverty, COVID is every day, right? And climate change, it's every day, which is actually driving a lot of this innovation as well. So not talking about SMEs, but how can we actually involve, the people living in poverty really as champions and innovators in this?
Well, with any communities that I had worked with on the local level in Nigeria, you always needed to employ and hire the people within the community. That's always key for me. But they're now kind of, I think, more of these kind of challenge funds, and even when people fund, organizations, there's still a struggle for the local entrepreneur and local companies to get funding from a lot of foundations, right? So what they ask for, they might not have. And what it means is that a lot of international organizations come just because they have the documentation, not necessarily because they have the technical experience. So we're also trying to challenge that in terms of trying to make sure that through the renewable energy associations of many of these countries, just to make sure that they're equipped and their business cases are equipped to further get the resources they actually need to thrive.
Yeah, it's super important to really stimulate that local development and enable them, because there are so many great minds out there. And I mean, people living in reality know best what they need and what they want, right? So,
yes.
I would like to address a question by Sayan Chakraborty, and I hope I pronounce your name right. And he's actually a founder of an energy efficient and optimization startup. And he wants to know what you think of the alignment between energy efficiency and access to energy programs, and what more can be done in that.
Well, I don't think you can talk about clean energy without talking about energy efficiency. You know, I don't think you ever see anybody that has that's not trying to connect some type of LED bulb. Like the whole point of clean energy is to make sure you're efficient at the beginning. So even if you're going to install any type of clean energy solution, it has to be efficient, unless it just won't work. So for me, it's integrated. It's not a correlation, it's integrated. In terms of energy efficiency as a whole, that's a different thing. So people who are already using kind of like, you know, still using old light bulbs and things like that, trying to convert them and show them that they can actually, it's actually more cost effective for them to change. I think that is a behavioral change, and a lot of work and advocacy really needs to go into that. But that is, and that needs to be tied again into economic growth. You need to tell them that this is kind of, you switch and you save money. That's the quickest way of getting people to change. Unfortunately, it's not telling them that it's better for the environment and all these places. But in terms of clean energy, I don't know of anybody who approaches any type of clean energy without having energy efficiency as an integral part.
Great. And I mean, you already mentioned it with climate change nowadays being unfortunately more and more visible, right? There's a great urgency to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as well. So many governments, the private sector, but also activist movements, the youth, they're really committed to transitioning, right, to a more sustainable energy approach. So I can imagine some might be a little bit more resisting to that as well, or perhaps even battling this change. So how do you talk to people that might not be 100% aligned with your goals? And how do you make a case to actually win them over? What kind of arguments do you use?
Well, first I listen, and you'll find that it's not like governments, especially governments, don't want to do the right thing. Like I said earlier, they don't have the resources to do that. And that's what the problem is. Unfortunately, we still live in a world that it's easier and it's cheaper at the beginning to get access to fossil fuel than it is to get to renewables. And it's our job to change that conversation and to be able to offer a clean energy offer that would be on par with whatever they were getting using fossil fuels, and to also be able to happen a little bit faster. I think that's the issue that we have. And then understanding again what the just transition means for that locality, instead of just emphasizing what we think, again, I'm in New York, or this is what to do. No, you need to really, really understand that locality and that audience. It does take a lot of time. It does take a lot of planning and a lot of prodding, but you tend to be able to convince people when you can show them that you understand their challenge. What you shouldn't do is dictate to them what they should do when you have no clue about the other challenges they face.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's where it starts with understanding, indeed, what people are needing as well, whether it's governments or other stakeholders in this. After all, I mean, we do want to avoid that we look back in 10 to 20 years, right, and realize that we had this great opportunity to make this change, and we failed because we were too late by acting now. Johanna Huren on LinkedIn was asking, what is this one key to success according to you? But also, what is the biggest obstacle that we need to overcome to succeed? And especially with this critical year ahead, right, for the planning for the planet and ahead of COP26. So what should people be looking out for?
I don't think there's one key to success, but if I had to name something that is critical for success, it's actually financing. And what people should be looking for is how to get more financing, because again, you know, it doesn't matter how great these plans are if there's no money to back them up. Things don't get done. And we've seen incredible amounts of progress, even in my role at the Energy Transition Council, chair with the COP president, the whole point of that council is to put together what the clean energy offer is. But we also have to explain to people that energy is that thing that you want to spend money on. It's a catalyst for health, agriculture, pretty much all the other SDGs that you're trying to channel. And investing in this is very, very critical, and investing in this now, not in a few years' time.
Exactly, and I mean, by making that case on showing that energy is this one thing that you need to invest in. What are some of the biggest misunderstandings that you sometimes hear around energy access?
First, people's view of what people need is not modern at all. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, oh, people don't have access, so all they need is a couple of light bulbs and they will be fine. There's a misuse on people understanding that energy isn't just at the household level. It's actually more powerful in terms of productive use, and that's where we should be channeling funding to. How can you empower somebody in energy so they can now develop themselves, and get out of poverty that way? And I guess finally, in terms of people not making the connection between energy access and climate, and that's particularly worrying, that people don't understand how critical that is to climate and how critical energy access is to making sure everything is basically established and delivered in a clean and sustainable way.
Yeah, so basically what I hear you saying, and correct me if I completely summarize wrong there, but just giving people access to some light won't really enable them to develop themselves. We actually need to also invest in productive use, and just to distinguish the two. Consumptive use is the lighting, for example, that you could use or charging your phone, or kind of the small scale energy, right? Productive use really to actually, make it productive to generate, for example, an income with it as well.
Yeah.
Is that also what you want to see more of in the energy access sector?
Definitely. I think you have a huge market with the SMEs. I think you have a huge market. Just even women, they do a lot of business at home. Even the small scale, villages, they're grinding or they're doing something, and being able to give them enough energy so they can have the right tools and they can get themselves out of energy poverty. It's key. Unless you have many programs that people they're coming back because they haven't actually gone out of any type of economic situation. We have farmers. I used to have farmers that would say, it's really nice that you gave me power at home, but it would be nicer if you gave me solar irrigation, because I'm at my farm for 16 hours a day, and I will sort out my house. And you have to listen to the voices, and you have to listen to the people who know what they need, and they want to get themselves out of extreme poverty. 150 million people, because of this pandemic, are going to go back into extreme poverty. It's a real thing. And we have to, as the global audience, be doing everything we possibly can to get those people out of that really horrendous situation.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just reasoning, for my own situation, I think many of us don't even think about energy as we would go about in our daily lives, right? We use it for so many different ways. We wake up with an alarm clock, we switch on lights. We just use it without even thinking about it. But in the end, we're having this conversation because we have access to energy, and the internet actually connects us, right? And still, there are so many people today that do not have access to just simple electricity. So how can we ourselves, as the global audience, make these conscious decisions to reduce our own consumption, and at the same time help others also to enjoy the same benefits that we are currently actually enjoying?
You have to understand how bad it is. I think the correct statistics is there's more energy used for video game players in the state of California than is being used for the entire country of Senegal. I just want you guys to understand the scale of it, roughly. And again, I might be wrong with my figures, but the rough average African and the sub-Saharan African uses 200 kilowatt hours a year, where in America it's 12,000. Okay, so when we think about things, obviously I'm very cautious. I turn off all the lights and blah. Let's think about that. It's complete energy injustice. There has to be a conscious effort by the developed world, because the climate problem isn't in Africa. No offense. Africa is only responsible for 2% of global emissions, but they are the victim of it. So everything we do and how we just amass and we just use with no consideration for anybody else needs to stop. We need to be cautious we need to turn things off. We need to take things to be efficient, and we need to really think, do I need to do this? Do I need to use energy for this? It's very, very important. Unless we won't fight the larger climate issues, even after we fight the energy access and also we achieve the energy access goals.
Exactly. So I hear you say a few things, but just curious to your take on, okay, on one hand, we talk about, we need to be energy efficient. We are, living in this very privileged life, having access to energy forever, what means we have and what needs we have. At the same time, we do want to stimulate development elsewhere, right? But we can't point for the climate problem to, for example, African countries. So how would you balance the two? Because in the end, I mean, you want to avoid others to make the same kind of mistakes, right? As we're making. I mean, we've learned a lot along the way. There's a lot of, I always compare it to mobile phones. There's a lot of countries that are actually just skipping, just the landlines and immediately go for mobile phones, right? So there's a lot of learnings that we can draw from developments that we are enjoying. So how do you see the balance between the two?
I see that we need to have exactly as much effort, even more, on making sure that we transition in the developed world properly and making sure energy efficiency is key as much as we have on energy access in the developing world. Right? I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think if you decide 565 million people in Africa or the 1 billion that don't have clean cooking, if they do that, unfortunately, in a dirty way, that's not going to leave anything. That's not going to really affect the climate. We just don't want it to happen. Do you see what I mean? But there are some key things now in the developed world. If something doesn't give, it will affect the developing world disproportionately, and it's sad. And I also think that a lot of developed countries should show key leadership, right? So when we are advocating to the countries to say, where are your energy transition plans, blah, 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 we can point to other countries that have done it, right? And we can point to hopefully funding to allow these countries to get there. But I feel like we can't focus all on the developed world and leave the developing world off the hook, if that makes sense. We have to keep equal pressure on everybody and equal accountability for what they're doing to our planet.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So on this note, I would just like to conclude that yes, we do need those key leaders, really, showing the good example on perhaps the developed world, or however we would like to address this, right? And at the same time, be mindful, that whatever we are using are going at the cost of what others can use as well. And there needs to be a good balance between those two. With that note, I would really like to remind the audience again, keep your eyes open for the Be Bold campaign that Damilola mentioned earlier. It's launching on March 16. And thank you, Damilola, for being a part of Ask an Expert. And I'm sure you inspired so many of us by sharing your stories and experiences and letting us peek a little bit into your world and how you work with governments and other stakeholders. And also thanks for everyone who joined this conversation. Yeah, so in case you have any last words, otherwise we will...
I just want to say thank you for having me. Please go on the Sustainable Energy for All website to find out about, anything we want to do. And please feel free to email me if you have any other questions. Thank you again. And thanks IKEA Foundation as well.
I think you will have quite a full inbox after the session, Damilola. Thanks a lot for your participation and inspiring us. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. What an incredible session. And I can tell you just by the number of comments, I mean, Jolanda, you got through so many of them, but we also had to leave a number of them behind. So thanks everyone who asked the questions. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them. We have to cut them off somewhere, but really inspiring. I mean, for me, whenever we talk about renewable energy, it's oftentimes, at least where I live, or when I'm talking to people, sometimes it's we get to save a little bit on our energy bill. That's the connection with renewable energy. But I think it's so important to give context to this and talk about how many things it touches, you know, climate, healthcare, business, livelihoods. It's such an important conversation, especially in how we're going to accomplish these goals in the future. So we really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're very, very busy. Big thanks to everyone who joined us. We also know you're very busy. So thank you for taking a little bit of time today to watch. Hopefully you enjoyed. And we're going to make sure we put some of these links that Damilola mentioned as well into the comments so that you can check these out. But I'm sure you can also Google SEforALL and all these wonderful things and find it quite easily. So with that, a big, big thank you. We'll wave goodbye and hope to see you next time on Ask an Expert. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.